Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider, and welcome back to the show. One of my favorite writers in the entire world, Drew Magary of The Defector. First, Drew, the Why Your Team Sucks series is out, so that's one of the reasons you're here. And then, of
Yes.
course, we have to talk about your Viking takes as a hardcore Vikings fan. But I want to say to start the show, I am so happy to see what has happened with Defector. As independent media myself here, the way that Defector has continued to grow and is thriving out in this world, I'm very happy about it. So, love to see it. Love to have you back on the show. What's going on, man?
Yeah, you think you're happy. I get health insurance, so it's nice. Like we we started 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years ago at the beginning of next month. So like right around like September 10th, September 12th. I'm not gonna say September 11th because September 11th has its own connotation. But since then, we've grown in subscribers. We've hired more people, more editors, more podcasts, stuff like that. So all that's been it's been great. It's been great for everyone to be part of it, and it's been fun. And I don't have to look for a job anymore, so that's very nice.
Yeah, and I also think that, just when you look at the model, and there was an article about the business model that sort of went in depth not too long ago, and
Yes.
if I've tried to deploy that even in my small little Purple Insider world. I just feel like what it tells us, and I probably no one cares about this but us, but like it tells us that it doesn't have to be this way. So many of our friends are getting fired all the time by media companies that mismanage their money and that have management that and ownership that tries to make as much money as possible and then just ends up spending too much, then losing money, then firing people. And the way that Defector has done it has shown that it doesn't have to work that way. So anyway, we could talk about that all day, but we could do that the next time you stop into Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We have
Well,
to
that I'm
talk
here to talk
about.
about the Vikings, man.
Yeah, right. Well, okay, yeah, for sure. So here's the interesting thing about you, Drew, that from now several years of you following Purple Insider and us talking,
Yes.
I have noticed that you both get excited and then sad, like almost simultaneously about the Vikings. And sometimes I can't figure out which one you actually are. Yeah, like Jaron Hall will make a good throw, and you'll say, "I love this kid," and then he'll throw an interception. No, he's probably awful, and I
Hey, for
and
the
I can
record,
never figure out.
I haven't said either of those things about Jaron Hall. I just want that out there. I just
It's
want
just
that.
an example. It's just an example.
I
And I
know.
guess I want to understand the ethos of Drew when it comes to following this team. Like, is it a more positive? Is it a more frustrated? Like, what is inside of you?
I mean, if you are a Vikings fan, you live on parallel tracks, right? And I don't think it's all that different from being a Bills fan, Chargers fan, if they have any, Lions fan, Browns fan, blah, 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 blah. You have to get yourself hyped up about the team. You have to be excited when they win because that's the point of being a fan. It's fun. It's fun when they win. And then when they lose, it sucks, and you're almost preconditioned to be fatalistic to soften the blow. The funny thing is that it doesn't soften the blow. It still sucks, right? Like the Giants game, like that loss wasn't any more fun just because it was, probable or was more than possible at the very least. So, there's not much rhyme or reason to it, but no fandom is ever really all that rational. It only makes sense when you win a bunch of crap, and the Vikings haven't done that, but maybe this year they do.
How did you view last year? Because one of the things that we talked about at the end of last season was whether it was a successful season or not. It was a heck of a ride, but we all kind of had a feeling that it was not going to end in February. And the way that it did, I think a lot of people went, okay, that was cute, but what was it all worth if it didn't go deep into the playoffs? There are a section of fans who at this point have dealt with this for so many years of getting to the first round, being eliminated, or just missing the playoffs, that I think that they're just exhausted of, hey, we had a fun regular season.
Yeah, I don't see last year that way. I thought last year was the most fun I've had as a Vikings fan in years. I guess 2017 was more fun because they went to the NFC title game, but like they didn't have games like the Buffalo game that year. They didn't have games like the Colts game. They didn't have games like even that win against the Patriots on Thanksgiving. Like they had some wonderful, wonderful games. I loved every second of it. And it sucked that it ended early, but it was like, it was the first year of Kwesi. It was the first year of Kevin O'Connell. It was another year of watching Justin Jefferson do what he does. I got to see Christian Darrisaw become one of the best tackles in football. I got to see the trade for Hawkinson, and he immediately became, I think, the second best tight end in football. You can argue that, but whatever. He became a great, great tight end. So it was a lot of fun to watch. The losses sucked, but what bothered me much more than that was people just saying, "Oh, well, they're not real." Like, and that was not. I mean, that could be Vikings fans, but that was really more sort of the conventional wisdom outside, right? Because they had the negative point differential despite having 13 wins. So everyone's like, "Oh, you know, it doesn't mean anything," and that I hate because those wins meant a lot to me. Like the whole point is for teams to win, and you can't. I don't like people who say that wins aren't a meaningful statistic because they are. Wins matter, rings matter, and look, the Vikings don't have any rings, but I honestly I chalk that up more as just really hideous luck. Than I don't think there's a curse. I don't think they're hexed. I think that they have all the resources in place and have for quite some time to win a championship, and they are by far the winningest team in NFL history not to have a ring. And so, if I am looking at the analytics, uh, I am saying that this team is more likely to win a title in the coming years than to look at 2022 and regard it as some dopey fluke that no one should ever respect. I think that's, and I hate that.
Yeah, I mean, last year you can't take away the entertainment value of those games or
No,
the fact that they won.
rocked. It was so cool. Like the Buffalo game, get the out of here. It was great.
Well, also, a lot of guys had to make amazing plays to make it happen, right? I mean, it's not like they didn't catch the ball on fourth and 18 with Justin Jefferson. Like he caught it, he made those plays. They had on that team a lot of guys who were sort of big moment type of players. Even if you'll never repeat 8 fourth quarter comebacks again, it's not like that everybody just fell down and handed them the ball and well, I guess in Washington, Taylor Heineke actually kind of did this, just handed them
No,
the ball. But
but
you know what I mean? Like they had to earn a lot of those wins.
they did, and they drilled for it. They prepared for it. I don't believe for a second that if Mike Zimmer was the coach of the team last year, that any of that would have happened. It wouldn't have. There's just no way. Like Kevin O'Connell is a really, really, really good coach. He makes some stupid play calls, and they all do, right? Like I remember seeing CJ Ham get called on a jet sweep on like 3rd and 1. Like that was stupid. Like he's gonna do stupid stuff. But in the macro, he's a good coach and he is doing things correctly, and that's why they won a lot of close games. It wasn't blind luck. You're a moron if you think that's true.
I think several of the games may have been blind luck, but you have to be in position to win the
No,
game.
never.
Just a, just a, just a couple. But I don't think I've ever seen before, Drew, a team win 13 games and then say, you know what? I don't think we could do that again if we tried by bringing everybody back, recognizing that everyone's going to be a year older and that though it's not blind luck, they would not be able to just repeat winning every close game, making every 61-yard field goal at the end of a game, and so forth. What do you think of the way that the front office has approached this thing to not just say, let's bring Thielen, Cook, Kendricks, all of them back, restructure their contracts, kick the money down the road, extend Kirk Cousins, and so forth, because that was an option that was on the table for them. And I think it was very rare that they decided not to do that.
Yeah, and it was smart. Like I think that if you are, um, if you're sort of removed from this team, you see those losses, Thielen, Cook, Kendricks, and those are name brand players, and you assume that they are a worse team without those players. That's not true. All of those players have fallen off, particularly Thielen, particularly Cook, frankly. They are not a worse team because of those losses. They are just as good, if not better, and they are better positioned to get better after this. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is Kirk Cousins because they were smart enough not to extend him, but Kwesi also restructured his contract to put more dead money into the future, which he shouldn't have done. But I think we can all go. I think it's safe to assume that this is Kirk's last year. The only problem is that they don't have, they have left themselves very, very little runway at quarterback to make a seamless transition with the roster that they have now. Because you put You put a great quarterback in here. You put a better quarterback than Kirk, and I think Kirk is a good quarterback. You put a championship quarterback in here. It's a championship team. Like it is. Like they're really, really strong, particularly on offense, right? Defense we can talk about in a moment, but um, I'm not seeing how they made really any wrong moves this offseason outside of kicking the can down the road at quarterback. They have to hope that they draft someone who turns out to be good next year, despite being unheralded, or they have to make a move in the offseason that I can't foresee. But the way that Kwesi has handled it, this is really his first whole offseason uh, as a GM, and I think he's done a good job. I think he did a much better job in this draft than they did in the prior draft. I think there's still a question as to how much juice he has in that building, but I'm not. I'm not of the mind that he is just uh, a tech sector bullshit anymore. Like I think he's good at his job.
I mean, I think that the overall direction was the right one to go. I guess the question is always, from my perspective, if you're going to go halfway down that road, should you have gone all the way down that road and completely just moved on from Kirk Cousins? And I do think it was a miscalculation the way they restructured. At least it's a miscalculation that only hurts them for 1 year on the salary
Right,
cap. So if they do draft a quarterback next year, yeah, they have to work around that hit. But then the following season, it's wide open, and they
right,
could take advantage of the rookie quarterback contract thing. But they also had the option to potentially trade Kirk Cousins and bring in whoever to be the quarterback, which is actually kind of the history of this team, is bringing in whoever at quarterback and still
right.
finding ways to win.
It's
And
always
that's what
someone else's
that's
quarterback.
well, no, that's one of the funny things about the argument of like, how can you do better than Kirk? It's like, I don't know. This franchise had the best season ever with Randall Cunningham, who was the quarterback of the Eagles when I was growing up and just showed up here for a year. Case Keenum took you to an NFC championship. Sometimes I feel like this, what are we going to do now, is a weird stance for a team that's seen so much success with random quarterbacks showing up.
Yeah, I think that's true because Randall was out of football before the '98 season. Like he came back to the league for that season. And when they had the Favre season in 2009, like he was awful with the Jets. Like he was essentially spent and just sort of found one last sort of bit of magic in him. So that's been my lifetime with the Vikings is them, sort of winning games, getting to NFC title games with other people's quarterbacks. And I think they're overdue to draft one and cultivate them because the best one in my lifetime has been Dante. And Dante, even though he had that one second. I think he came second in MVP voting. It was the year Peyton Manning broke the TD record. So, but right after that, Dante had problems. He wasn't like a perfect quarterback. So they're overdue to do that. But I don't fault them for going through the competitive rebuild, as Kwesi put it, because and this was something I should have known, but I only realized it this year when I was doing my homework on the Bears is that no team has gotten a ring from tanking since the Dallas Cowboys in the early 1990s. None. Zero. Go look it up. Like, none of them. And so I'm of the mind that tanking in the NFL doesn't work. It works in it works in basketball. That's for sure. But in the NFL, no. Like, you're better off uh, building a winning atmosphere and incorporating players into that atmosphere so that they can learn how to be a winning team. If you bottom out and you want to go 3-13 a million years in a row, and you think that you can trust the process that way, it doesn't. Look at the Browns. They suck. Like it just doesn't happen that way. Even the Bengals failed their way into Joe Burrow. That was not deliberate. They were just being the Bengals, and they got Joe Burrow. So that wasn't like a deliberate tank job. They were just sucking because they suck. Like so, I'm not of the mind that tanking is really the way to go, and I sure as hell don't want to watch it.
I was going to follow up by asking how you determined whether a team was tanking. I mean, that Colts team that drafted Peyton Manning, they knew Peyton Manning was coming out that season. I don't think it was quite a mistake, right?
But they had Jim Harbaugh as their starter that year, and
Oh,
Jim Harbaugh had taken them to the playoffs. Like he had taken them. I think he took them to the AFC title game. If it wasn't the season prior, it was the year before that. It wasn't that far. It was 1997. So it wasn't that they weren't that far removed from contention under Jim Harbaugh. So that's the one where you could sort of say, okay, maybe they were tanking because Harbaugh, the that year, the year before they got Peyton Manning, Jim Harbaugh got suspended for getting in a fight with Jim Kelly because Jim Kelly called him a baby, which is a great little bit of trivia. But like, so there might have been a spot in during that season where they were like, we're just gonna let it go. But it was not a master plan. It was not what Ryan Poles is doing in Chicago right now, where he's stripping everything down to the studs and trying to build it up back up again with a quarterback who can't throw the ball. So, I'm not, again, I'm allowed to have my doubts about that way of going, particularly when you already have a roster that has Darisaw, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Brian O'Neill, all those guys on
So I agree with you that this team is not in a position to tank when you
it.
have Justin Jefferson.
No.
Even if you tried, he would probably get you, and just the weapons that you have just get you enough. And with an offensive minded coach and Kevin O'Connell, you also don't want to bring him in. If you're going to tank, you should have done it the first year with him, because if you're going to bring him in, win 13 games, you can't go back and win three,
No.
because that's going to be pretty obvious. And also, tanking destroys the inside of a building, and that's
Yeah.
not something you want to do
Yeah,
after.
because
But
you kill the roster and you kill morale, and you have to build both back up again, and that's hard. Like, this is not. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do 100th of that job. Like, it's just too hard. You can't do it.
I'm still going to call your research on that questionable, because there's, a lot of highly drafted quarterbacks who have led really good teams, like Andrew Luck turning around the franchise. Eli Manning wins a couple Super Bowls. Phillip Rivers was pretty highly drafted. So,
You know
there's
what
uh,
I think the closest example, the best one I could think of, was the Eagles tanking that one game against Washington a couple years ago, mainly so they could get a better draft pick. But that was one game. I don't really count that. I mean, it was like they got Peterson out of the paint, they got Sirianni, and by the way, they still didn't win the Super Bowl last year. So, like, I only grade this based on whether or not you win a Super Bowl, and because that's all I give about. So,
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Andrew Luck's career is unnecessary. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that when they got here, they had an option of what direction they wanted to go. They picked the competitive rebuild. And now what you have is a pretty good football team.
yeah.
But every night when I do my nightly chats, there's these debates about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Is this team going to be bad? Is this team going to be okay? But I don't think anyone sees it as a Super Bowl contender. It's awkward, I think, to me, to have a sort of a team in transition for this year. In the bigger picture, like, you could see a Buffalo from Tyrod Taylor to Josh Allen, or Kansas City, maybe not the next Mahomes, but that whole situation with moving on from an Alex Smith being
Yeah, that's one
similar to this.
you've picked a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
I could
and
go with
and
that.
yeah, and that makes sense, right? To try to recreate something like that and just hope that the quarterback works out. But we also have to play this season. And that's where it's sort of weird. Like, they're out there practicing, and Jefferson looks really good, and the defense looks very intriguing with Brian Flores, and they've got some weaknesses, and I'm like, I guess we just sort of throw our hands up and say whatever happens happens with this year.
Well, the other thing is that in my lifetime, the Vikings have always had a great. Whenever the Vikings have gone to the NFC title game and had a great season, it's always been a year where they were projected to be mediocre. Like 1998, they were not projected to be they weren't projected to be a team, but they weren't. They're usually like projected to go 8-8. Same deal in 2017. Same deal in 2009. Kind of the same deal in 2001. So they started out 11-0 that year, but then they were terrible at the end of the season, but they still managed to get the NFC title game, and then they got blanked. So, like, the way that their history, they've had their brightest moments when they have overachieved, and this is a team that people do not expect anything of this year. If I hear the term regress to the mean one more time, I'm gonna put my I'm gonna put my fist through a wall. Like, it's just like, I'm looking at the roster, and yeah, okay, they're not going to win 13 games, but they're going to win a good number of games, particularly in that division, particularly in that conference. Like, I don't see how they aren't the best team in that division. Like, you want me to buy into Detroit as a better team? Get the out of here. It's not going to
How confident are you in this opinion? Like, how many dollars of your own money would you spend on this? Like, that's a
happen. I mean,
that's a
I'm not
good
going
way
to
to measure.
bet. That's stupid.
I'm not saying bet me. I'm not saying bet me. I still have them winning 10. That's where I've got them. But I
Yeah,
want to I want to test I want to test the confidence of this take. That was said very confidently. But
yeah.
if I said, "All right, you have to put $10,000 on the over." Like,
Well,
is that
look,
too much?
10 grand. I mean, it's like,
You sounded pretty confident, but now you're backing off.
yeah, yeah. But look, I wouldn't bet $10,000 on like the sun rising tomorrow. Like, I wouldn't. Like, it's too much money. I'm not gonna do it. There's always a chance, like a nuclear bomb blows up the world, and then I'm out $10,000 and I'm dead. That sucks. I don't want that.
That would be bad. Okay. How about 500? Would you do 500?
Let's go with 100. Although now I have to
Okay,
make that bet,
100.
which is annoying, but I'll make it.
But that's also not that much confidence. If you're going only $100, you're like very on the
That
fence about how this is going to go.
no. That's less about confidence than me having a brain about how gambling works. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm confident.
Okay.
I think they'll win the division. I I'm going to save this for the Vikings preview. My overall take about the team this year, but I think they win the division. I think it's perfectly fine to say that. I think everything sets up for them to have pretty much the exact same season they had a year ago, right? Fantastic offense, defense, goes to the playoffs. Their Achilles heels are all exposed, and they can't get past San Francisco, Philadelphia, one of those teams like that. But I don't think the door is completely shut on them. I think that they are certainly talented enough on offense and on the coaching staff, particularly Brian Flores is the DC now. I think that all of that portends good things for them rather than me just looking at their point differential from a year ago and saying, well, they're not going to be as good. Like, that's, to me, that is far more short-sighted than looking at what is actually the actual human beings involved here. Because I think O'Connell's a really, really good coach.
Yeah, which I guess that we move on quickly in the NFL. It's like, oh, he can coach. All right, now let's go worry about other stuff. But when you consider how many coaches in the last decade have been hired and turned into Urban Meyer, Joe Judge, Matt Patricia, I mean,
Right?
you really lucked out there. Hey, and you might have been this close to hiring Jim Harbaugh, which
I
I don't
wanted
think was going to go
Harbaugh.
all that well.
I
You
was
wanted
like,
Harbaugh
I
desperately.
wanted Harbaugh. And like, now I'm like, no, that's a bullet dodged. I'm glad we didn't do that.
I feel like that's when we became friends, is me trying to talk you out of Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I don't think I listened either. And then KO came aboard, and he was saying, I think I was, I'm a sucker. So like I had already bought into O'Connell by training camp because he did the thing where he didn't play his starters in the preseason games in any of them. And last night the Commanders started their whole starting offense against the Ravens in a fucking preseason game and got Terry McLaurin hurt, which is the stupidest, most antiquated you could possibly do as an NFL team. And I liked the fact that it was clear to me that KO was doing all of the things that you are supposed to do as a modern NFL coach, and it paid off on the back end. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't happen again.
Yeah, I 100% on the preseason games. They're not that entertaining to cover, and I can't get that many big takeaways, but it's 100% the smart way to go about it.
Of
And
course.
guess how many starters they've lost in the last 2 years? 0 to preseason games.
Yep.
And having it be more controlled joint practices where they do those evaluations and installs, I think is just kind of a clever idea, and doing it multiple times. What are you most intrigued by? Like, okay, so we've decided the defense is going to have its problems. We think we know the offense. What is the mystery of the Minnesota Vikings 2023 to you?
Well, do you mean mystery or like worry? Because I mean,
Worry is almost everything all the time for Vikings fans. So maybe
I,
the you know,
I mean, the chief worry, of course, is the interior offensive line, but that's been every year since 2017, right? So, I mean, that's nothing new. I think the intriguing mystery, the fun mystery, is the secondary, right? Mekhi Blackman, Josh Metellus, who I think is actually, I think he's a good player. Like, I think he's so good of a player that it's clear to me that Lewis Seen will never catch him. I think Seen and I think Andrew Booth are both busts. Like, I think I can safely say that now. But Metellus, Blackman, maybe Jawan Williams, although that I think is a little bit iffy. But I'll be interested to see how those safeties and how those corners play, particularly with Flores in charge. I think that the interior of the defensive line, like the interior of the offensive line, is a worry. And so that's been the case for the past few years now, where they've been a very good team in certain spots, but they ultimately get undone at the line of scrimmage. And so the big mystery for this team is whether or not they can win games on the line of scrimmage going forward this year. If they can do that, they're a contender. If they can't, if they are regularly getting beaten on the line of scrimmage, then they're going to have the same problems that they had in the playoffs against the Giants.
I think that that is true. And we have, because there's so many question marks about the cornerbacks, and I guess to some extent the safety position and Brian Flores when you're just coming into training camp, that we just haven't talked much about the defensive line, which looks like it's going to have Kairos Tonga playing a lot. And last year he was pretty good, but that's asking a player to go from being cut by the Bears last year to now being your starting nose tackle. Maybe there's some Jerry Ball in there, but that's a lot. And Harrison Phillips has just been a guy throughout his career, like pretty good at the run stuffing, but not some spectacular force. And Dean Lowry has had his moments against the Vikings, but is not necessarily a needle mover. And that's the thing about Brian Flores is I've been really impressed how he takes players' skill sets and he puts them in the right position. But there's only so much you can do as that guy. And there's only so
Right.
many blitzes you can send. Like you have to have personnel at the end of the day. And I'm still kind of convinced that even as bad as Ed Donatel was at his job, that their personnel would still not have resulted in a great defense last year, no matter what he did. So that's kind of the conflict of the defense for me with Flores is I think they can end up with a bad defense and he does a good job.
Yeah, I think that is actually the likely thing, where they will make more fun, cool plays than they did a year ago. And they made a lot of good plays a year ago with Donatel, but that was almost by happenstance. I think this year will be more by design. But you're right. This is a team that throughout my lifetime has had a really good history on defensive line, and not just on the outside with Dolman and Millard and Everson Griffin and Jared Allen, all those guys, but on the inside too. Henry Thomas, John Randall, the Williams Wall, guys like that. They have been barren at that position now for quite some time. And even if Kairos Tonga emerges, it's, he's not going to be the sort of interior force that you're going to get with John Randall. And if they had someone like that, they'd be a very, very good defense indeed. But, I think I basically have to hope for that emergence during the season, or I have to hope that Flores can do something with smoke and mirrors to make that interior more formidable than it is on paper.
So you're working on your why your team sucks for the Vikings, which is always an absolute must and just has a little more soul to it because of your Vikings fandom.
That's right.
I don't want you to ruin, but I want you to tease. What's different? You've been doing this for a long time. You've said a lot of things about the Vikings over the years,
Yep.
but what is new to say about the Vikings when you are creating your diss track to every team?
I mean, everything changes year by year, right? Like a year ago, I was dying for them to trade Kirk, right? Couldn't wait for it. I was so annoyed that Kwesi gave him that little extension. I was like, it's like finding out you're going to spend another year in prison, right? And then last year happened, and of course, Kirk balled out. Like he was fails, and like I know everyone's going to say, oh, the fourth down behind the sticks, Giants game. Yes, I understand. I was at that game. I saw the pressure in his face. I was at the angle, right? I'm not going to make any more excuses for Kirk than that. But, if you watched last season and you watched him on quarterback where he had 9,000 cracked ribs all season long because the interior of the line sucked, it was hard not to be fond of him and to know also that it's more likely than not that whoever replaces him will be worse. That's just sort of the law of averages, right? They have to replace him, but the likelihood of them finding someone as good is by its very nature going to be low. It's going to be very hard for them to do. I think O'Connell is the kind of coach who can get the most out of any quarterback that he has. He did it with Kirk a year ago. He'll do it with Kirk again this year. But, I'm in a different spot with Kirk this year where it's just like Kirk for him to finally go, because I think he's gone after this year. But for me to be like a little like, oh, so there's that. And then there's also, I've genuinely had enough of my own fatalism with regards to the Vikings. I think last year sort of cured me of that. It's much more fun to believe. Even if you end up with your heart broken, who cares? Like when you believe and when stuff like the Buffalo game happens, forget it. It's as good as it gets. I enjoy it. I'm a fan for a reason. I don't sit here and be like, well, why am I a fan of this team? I have honestly enjoyed being a Vikings fan more often than I have not been a Vikings fan. And I know that sounds like, well, why are you doing that for why your team sucks? Trust me, there are so many fans who are Vikings fans who are not like that. And I think I've had enough of
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, a myriad of fan opinions is always good because then I can kind of gather them all. But the most frustrating is when it's August and you have someone in the comments that says the GM sucks and this team's going to be horrible, and you're like,
it.
okay, well,
Yeah,
I guess we should just I guess I'll just not talk about the rest of the season then because it's already over. I mean, that's a hard place to be
yeah.
for any team right now, right? I mean, that's why the NFL Nation ESPN reporters always pick their team to, the total of the teams to win 50 more games than is possible, right? Because hope is springing eternal going into the season.
Well, that's
Well,
the fun. That's the point. The point is to hope, and it's like there is value in that, even if it is not realized at the end of it. Right? It's it's just enjoying the idea of a bright future in life, and that's a good way to live your life. If you live your life as, oh, everything's gonna go wrong, oh, the world's a terrible place, there's nothing to look forward to, go die. Like you're not getting anything done. Like what's the point? Why are you here? Like you may as well keep your chin up, see how it goes, because this is a fact. The Patriots, when I was growing up, were dog. They were an embarrassment, and no one in New England cared about that team. No one in New England cares about them now, of course, but they turned it all around. There's so many sports stories like that that have proven that curses aren't real, hexes aren't real. A team can get together at any time and surprise you. The Bengals could win a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow at the helm. It happens, and you have to know that innately. And if you just discount it, you're depriving yourself of a lot, I think.
yeah, I mean, for me, it was the Saints. Like Mike Ditka is their
Yeah,
coach, and
they were an embarrassment. They were a disgrace, and that was true of the Golden State Warriors, right? Like the Golden State Warriors didn't mean in the 80s and 90s. They are now like the preeminent face of basketball, even though they had a bad year last year. So like you have to understand that these things are cyclical. They don't stay the same. Things evolve, things change, and particularly Minnesota, which has ownership that is committed to the team. They have the stadium, they have the personnel in place, they have good players. I think you're a fool to sit there and wave all of that off just because Ed Ingram can't pass block. Like like it's like you have to see uh, you have to see the forest for the trees.
so what do you got? 10 wins, 12 wins,
I'll
14 wins.
go.
After
I'll
that,
go
right, you got to go
10.
at least 14.
I think
14.
they're. I think they're a 10 or 11 win team. I think they are, and I think they can make a run. I don't particularly in the NFC like the best team is San Francisco. Well, they got quarterback problems. Like as good as Brock Purdy was a year ago, he's hurt. I was not, no one was sold on him by the end of last season, even though he had played very well. Trey Lance is a bust. He's such a bust that no one would trade for him this offseason. And then you got Sam Darnold, who's the other quarterback, and that's Sam Darnold. So, like, that team has a pretty pronounced weakness. And then you have the Eagles, who I think are demonstrably worse than a year ago. And then you have, what, the Cowboys? I mean, come on, man. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I'm going to buy into Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott just because, like, they're cooler. Just because Dak is cooler than Kirk. Like, I'm not buying into that. I think the Vikings this year are a division champion, and I think they can go on a run. I'm not going to guarantee any of that, but I'll go bet the $100 now and put my money where my mouth is, so you can say, "All right, Drew's not full of shit. I'll actually make the bet."
All right, we will keep track of that. Your $100 bet on the Vikings. Well, Drew, I can't wait to read Why Your Team Sucks. Obviously, you are one of my favorite writers in the world. I read everything, every fun bag that comes out every week, and get inside your twisted mind. So I highly suggest, that people get on board with Defector if they have not done so. Go find it. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I'm glad we could catch up before the season starts, and you have anything to be sad about.
Yeah, no. Let me return the favor. This is Purple Insider is like the dominant thing I read every week. Like, of course, I read Defector, but I work at Defector, and I'm automatically going to like Defector, right? But when it comes to like appointment reading, the second something comes up in my email inbox from you, that's what I read, because there isn't. I have been reading about the Vikings my whole life, really. Uh, you and Purple Insider are by far the best Vikings reading that I get to do. So thank you for that. Thank you for answering my texts, even when I send them when I'm stoned. It's like 8 o'clock on a Friday night. That's very nice of you. And also, I got to plug the Distraction. It's the podcast I do with David Roth every week, and we talk about football, but we also talk about sandwiches and stuff like that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I do enjoy the text messages, and in part because of the roller coaster ride of your Vikings mind. Always is entertaining for me. So, thanks again, man. Really, really appreciate all your support through the years of Purple Insider, and means a lot for you to say that stuff. So, thanks for taking the time to come on, and we will get together again, maybe to keep tabs on how your confidence level in that $100 bet is going.
We'll see each other at the Super Bowl. It'll be fun. It'll be great.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. All right. Thanks
And by
for
the way, tell O'Connell to sign Risner. All right, let's get on with that. Okay.
Okay. Well, see, you had to be the guard guy just before the end.
Had to be.
Bye, Drew.
See ya.